How do you think Dana White reacted when he got the phone call for Jon Jones' situation? Do you
Probably
think he
some.
ignored it, or do you think he actually answered it? I'm sure he had to
I,
answer it.
I mean, he had to answer it, but I think at this point it's probably like, huh, like, oh, again, again. It's man, listen, Dana. I think at this point, Dana doesn't even know what to do with this guy. Like, because you can't cut him because he's still, at the end of the day, he's still a huge draw.
This whole situation is just crazy to me, man.
Well,
Like,
how about, before you get into it, what is the situation if the listeners aren't aware of what we're talking about?
so for the listeners who don't know, Jon Jones, former UFC champion, has been arrested for what appears to be the beating of his wife. Now,
And assaulting a vehicle.
And assaulting a vehicle. Now, as the reports came out, his wife has denied that. And of course, he has denied that. But if you read the report, there are several things in the report that do not look good for Jon Jones. Jon Jones's kid was the one who actually suggested that the cops be called. Now, to me, when I read the article, that was really the detail that did it, because no kid should want to call the cops on their, parents. But that just seems to be as to what happened. Now, even though his wife did deny it, and, it seems like they're back together in their videos and whatnot, I think that this is not a good look for Jon Jones at all. And me personally, I still feel with the thought I had last week of him just fading away. You know what I mean? I think Jon Jones has done a lot for the sport, but anything else, this is going to be one, he should fade away, because I feel like we shouldn't. It appears that Jon Jones did something. You know what I mean? Now, there's no proof of that, but it appears that way. So, but if he continues to fight, this is always going to be a constant thing. It's similar to the PEDs and whatever. I feel like how many, more of these do you really need to go? You know what I mean? Is it going to take one more thing? Because it keeps on getting worse at this point in time.
I mean, it does. It has gotten worse. I don't know. It's one of those weird things when it comes to him, because his talent is so high. His level of talent is so high and regarded so high within the community of MMA and combat sports, that it's one of those things where it's like, you're so talented, to let you go would be the biggest loss for anybody within the sport, within the UFC itself. Because trust me, I'm quite sure ONE FC, PFL, Bellator, I'm quite sure all of them are salivating at the chance to sign Jon Jones the moment they would release him. So that part is kind of tricky, but when it just talking about what happened in this whole situation with him, it's really sick. If what we read in the article is true, it's really upsetting, and it seems like he did have some admission of guilt via his story, just based off him saying, "Hey, I've learned my lesson again. I'm not going to be drinking, and I'm only going to be lifting weights and working out." And you see him bench pressing 225 on his story when he's saying this. So, or captioning that over the video of him doing bench pressing 225. So I don't know, man. This is a tricky one, man, because the guy is just too talented to let go, and him fading away. I think him fading away is either it comes one of two ways. Either it's a suspension, or that it would be a suspension that would push him to 39 or 40 years old, or it would be he would have to fade away in the way Anderson is, and that's just losing, having a bad streak where I'll still watch you, but you're a shell of who you were. And Jon hasn't shown that yet. He hasn't shown that. Granny's taken 2 years off, but he hasn't shown it yet, man.
Well, here's my thing for Jon Jones, right? Me personally, in this situation, I find it hard to, essentially separate what he's done to what he's doing now, only because his kids and wife are involved. You know what I mean? I feel like that should be like, hey, like that's like the last straw. You know what I mean? I'm not necessarily saying it's weird because according to reports and whatnot, you know, his wife, I guess, never pressed charges. So it's like he seems to be, you know, free and everything's good to go. So I don't know. It's weird because do you follow the punishment of the law or do you enforce it yourself? It is a tricky situation, but at the same point in time, I don't know. It's just, I feel like how much is too many? You know what I mean?
Right. But even then, in this type of situation, right, it gets even trickier because then you look at someone like Greg Hardy, where I believe when he came into the UFC, there was some things I think that were speculating around him where I think he had, I believe it was Greg Hardy, had assaulted his girlfriend or whatever. I'm not sure if it was girlfriend or his fiance or what she was to him, but it was his spouse nonetheless. And this happened immediately, like a week or two before his fight, and he still fights. Now, granted, this is like his one strike compared to the several that have been lengthened for Jon. So it gets a little tricky in that situation. So and I mean, I think honestly, my biggest concern just as a fan, from a fan's perspective, is I just think Jon at this point, and who knows? I mean, we've said this before. There's been plenty at this point. But he really needs to get out. Like, all jokes aside, even DC says, like, yo, you got to do better. Like this, and that's his mortal enemy, right, for lack of better terms.
Well, so. I mean, of course, he's been saying this stuff for a while, though. You know what I mean? Like, he's had words to say about Jon Jones because Jon Jones said, like, hey, I've made mistakes, and DC said this is like, you know, just his behavior and who he is. You know, I think that when you're doing things over and over and over again, you know what I mean? If it's seemingly getting worse, like it's one thing if he's still riding around New Mexico drinking vodka, shooting his gun in the air. You know what I mean? Like nobody's getting hurt by that. It's wild. Bro, it's a wild thing to do, but nobody's getting hurt.
Bullets have no names, though.
He's shooting in the air, in the sky.
Where does the bullet? So the bullet just the bullet is not Bobby Shmurda's hat. It's got to come down.
Okay, but who's it hitting up there though?
Who the bullet gonna hit when it drop?
I hear you.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like the laws of science, man. You get what I'm saying? Like I'm not justifying it, but I'm not justifying you beating your wife.
You never took a gun and shot her in there?
Nah, I don't shoot guns, man. I don't shoot guns. But nah, like that's my thing at the end of the day. Like I'm not justifying him beating his wife over shooting a gun.
Right.
But I think at the end of the day, he just gotta one or two things is gonna happen. Either my guy is going to get tangled up in some more issues because when he was drinking that one time before, he hit a car. It had a pregnant lady in it. He hopped out of his whip and he ran, and then he got arrested the following day after.
See, I feel like back in the day, people would say, hey, this was young Jon Jones, though. You know what I mean? Like, oh, he was younger. He just made a mistake. You know what I mean? I feel like that was easier back in the day before he had like 2 or 3 of these.
I mean, I guess people would give him that pass, but even then, I don't even know because even during that time, there was like a snowball of effects, man. Right. Like first DC fight, I think that's when he popped for coke or something like that.
Yeah.
And then shortly after the coke situation is when he hit the chick with the car, and it was just like, yo,
you're right.
You're not doing good already. Like that wasn't the first thing that happened. Him hitting the woman when he was drunk was after he had already gotten in hot water. Yeah. And then it just snowballed. So it's like, now don't get me wrong. And I'm not justifying his actions because to me, when those type of actions happen, even for me personally, I probably won't root for him anymore, especially if these allegations are true, because I just don't support anybody that hits women.
Of course.
Any man that hits, and I think we all can agree to that, even Lau, who's not here. But it's one of those things, man, where it's like, yo, you have so many chances, you're messing up. But at this point, I think for him, he's just going to have to, like, the only way Dana's going to be able to write him off is if he loses, because unless you cut this guy, he's going to pack a stadium. You can't give him second to none talent because he's going to beat them. You put him in front of someone. I mean, maybe the closest, maybe the best matchup he could probably pray for. And when I say that I mean Dana is hoping maybe Cyril Gahn fights him and beats him. And then maybe that's like, okay, this is like the passing of the torch type of fight, but I don't see that happening.
Well, I mean, I guess we'll just have to wait and see as to what happens with Jon Jones. You know what I mean? Like,
Definitely.
The way I see it is like, I would hope that there's no truth to this, but the situation doesn't look good for Jon, and that's just being realistic. But